Hello, and welcome to the New Frontier with Jaron Stout and Kevin Walker. And today we're going to switch gears just a little bit. We've got an attorney on the show. So we're typically attorneys are going to make things kind of boring, but we're going to spice it up here a little bit. I've known Leigh Davitian for many years. So we'll just give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself to our audience. Please go ahead, Leigh.
Oh gosh, okay. Love not talking about myself. Okay, so I am a lawyer in Washington, D.C. I have my own law, policy, and lobbying firm for 23 years. I started before getting in healthcare law. I was at the Department of Justice in the U.S. Prosecutor's Office, thinking that I wanted to be a U.S. prosecutor, but decided very quickly that that's not where my passion was. So after about 3 years of that, I landed at the American Society of Consultant Pharmacists in 1993. And I have been a part of long-term care pharmacy, specialty pharmacy, clinical pharmacists being paid for their clinical interventions for 33 years. So I'm excited to be able to talk to you all today about some of my thoughts. I represent a lot of different healthcare disciplines, from physicians to nurse practitioners to certified nurses assistants to geriatricians to oncologists and a whole plethora. And I kind of know where those trends are going and how they are incorporating you all in that space. So that's what I hope to be able to share some with you today.
All right. So let me give everyone a little bit of context on how we met, which was September of 2021, if I remember correctly. Um, at that point, I had been working on innovative clinical services for about 3 years. I'd tried collaborative practice agreements in nursing homes. I'd tried, some other things, and I was listening to other innovators podcasts or educational seminars like Blair Thielmeyer. Was kind of the one who started it all. And I remember hearing about Incident 2 and CCMs. And the moment I became aware of them, it became my mission and my journey to find out how to translate what everyone else was doing in ambulatory care and translate it into nursing facilities. Because from what I could find, everyone was telling me, no, you can't do it there. But I was kind of stubborn about it. So in 2018, I began that journey. I teamed up with a few physicians. I tried to do some Incident 2. But there was a lot of barriers. And figuring out how to translate all those services into the nursing home regulatory sphere was very complicated. And so I tried the journey all alone for about 3 years, and it was miserable, I might add. And one thing that actually slowed it down was COVID, obviously. When 2020 hit, I kind of put everything I was working on hold as far as innovative services and just focused on traditional consulting. No one could even step foot in the nursing homes. There was a lot of problems with all that, even though they lightened the restrictions on making it more available to offer these services, easier to offer. So around September of 2021, I was looking at all this stuff I'd been trying to doing, and I was just running into so many issues, and I had a corporate nurse just shut it down. Like, you cannot do this. And so finally, I reached out to a very dear friend of mine, Dana Saffel. And I just said, hey, I just feel like I can't navigate this on my own anymore. Who do you know that's a Medicare attorney, an attorney that does Medicare, that can help me navigate this and figure this out? And she said, call Leigh Davitian, and gave me your number. And, and she told me she's in DC, and I was like, oh, great. So I'm going to call this high-powered attorney in DC.
Oh, yeah.
Little old me in Salt Lake City, I'm never going to hear back. So I left a voicemail September of 2021, just introducing myself. I got your number from Dana Saffel, and you called me back, I think, in 2 or 3 days, which I was shocked by. I was like, oh, wow, this attorney's calling me back. Okay, so So I gave you some context on everything I was working on. You gave me huge insight, help, and then I was able to. You were able to help me go and have a meeting with this corporate nurse that was shutting everything down, and basically shut her down.
Yes. Yes.
And show them that the legal pathway was legit, it was sound, and it worked. And from that day forward, my career has started on an exponential trajectory. And so, for that, I just want everyone to know what a critical component she's been in my career, and all the stuff that she's doing for us right now at ASCP, helping me to make this more things that we can all build on together, and take our entire profession to the next level. And that's what we're working on. So I just want everyone to get that context on where we're coming from here today. Um,
I
and
know it was meaningful because I really think that Jaron has that written down in a journal somewhere. Like when he writes the autobiography of Jaron's life, like I could hear the dates that he's written down. I was going to ask you, Jaron, if you remember what the weather was like or the shirt you were wearing that day.
It was a warm day.
It was a warm day.
It was a warm day.
It was sultry.
See, I have him in Utah, so I love snow. It was snowing that day, and he was getting ready to go skiing.
Set the scene, my friend. No, that's beautiful. And one thing I have to tell you, Leigh, having the last name Davitian, like for lawyers, like to have those kinds of last names, like how perfect is that? I mean, was that something that you were like, okay, I've got to go into law when you were like, this Davitian last name is just way too fitting?
Okay, so I'm an empowered female, and I didn't think I was going to take my husband's name when I got married because I thought, I'm an empowered young attorney. I think I'm going to mix things up. And then I thought, you know what? I'm thinking if we have children, and I'm thinking, am I really that empowered? So it's really compliments to my husband for having a fabulous last name. Um, but the problem is that I graduated law school right around the time the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas was an issue. So every interview I went to, they're like, oh, Leigh Davitian, are you Branches or Blanche's Davidian's child? And I'm like, okay, this is not going to work out. But it kind of slides off the tongue, Leigh Davitian. So thank you for that.
With the background piece, the one thing I'm curious with you two, I know that I've seen videos of you guys together with super cute smiling faces, and there's already stuff that you're working on today. So fast forward to now, from your guys' first kind of starting in that snowy day when you encountered each other to just recently. What's the stuff you guys are working on together to be able to help the pharmacy world out?
Well, one of my passions being a part of long-term care pharmacy, or just pharmacy in general, is no discredit to the pharmacy component, because it's very critical. We all know that. Without medications and drugs and without pharmacies, what would the pharmacy or pharmacist industry look like? So that's the backbone of your all's industry. But when I was at ASCP, I really gravitated more to the clinical side, because one of my passions was geriatric patients, disabled patients, a lot more of wanting to help people. So even though I did both the operational side for the pharmacies, I did gravitate toward the clinical side. So when I left ASCP, I started my own firm, and I was asked by a very large pharmacy to go and be their senior legislative counsel. And I'm like, love you guys dearly, but I'm not into operations. I want long-term care pharmacies and pharmacies to succeed, but I'm kind of a clinical girl. So I always thought about either being an archaeologist or a doctor or a lawyer. And obviously I landed on the latter. So my passion's always been a little bit of medicine. So having said that, the one thing, Kevin, that really hit me when I was at ASCP, dealing with a lot of very talented entrepreneurial consultant pharmacists that just mesmerized me every day, was the fact that they were not able to really work outside of a certain level of scope to the top of their academic achievements. And just watching them work within this narrow band of consultant pharmacy in the geriatric pharmacotherapy space, which was mandated under OBRA 87, that they couldn't really be overly clinical because of their lack of being a bona fide healthcare professional under the Social Security Act, which we're all familiar with, which was my first issue at ASCP 33 years ago, is amending the Social Security Act to establish you guys as bona fide healthcare professionals to be able to bill directly to government payers. And here we are today, hoping that we can maybe get something smaller, but eventually something. So what I have done over the last 23 years, having my own firm, is really been following the clinical trends and capabilities for pharmacists to be able to be more entrepreneurial and to have a more clinical sense to them. So I started following the incident to billing issue pretty much I'd say 1997 is when, well, let's go back historically, because I love origins. I love archaeology, so I like starting with origins. But not to bore the viewers or you all, but the incident to billing under Medicare Part B is an opportunity for physicians to have healthcare professionals, non-physician practitioners, be a part of a collaborative team to use their skills incident to the physician and bill under the physician's Medicare number. Well, 1977, when it was first created, it was really more for nurse practitioners and then eventually physician's assistants because of the shortage of physicians in rural areas. And then in 1997, Congress opened it up to a lot of other non-physician practitioners, social workers, PAs, OTs, midwives, psychologists, and believe it or not, pharmacists. But nobody was picking up on it because we were all very consumed with the prospective payment system for the new payment to be rendered, obviously, in care settings. So the whole world was all about PPS. So here I am going, okay, everyone, this is a perfect opportunity, but no one else was quite getting it. Fast forward to 2009. 2009, there was a little bit of an outcry of physicians wanting pharmacists to be a part of their care team. So in 2009, it was established that pharmacists are considered auxiliary personnel under incident to billing, and that they could bill incident to a physician under their MPI number. So here I am, already having my own firm for 8 years, screaming to everybody, what is going on? Why are you all not out there doing this? This is a perfect opportunity for you all to finally collaborate with physicians. They're taking you seriously. Fast forward then, Kevin, to 2014. That's when the American Academy of Family Physicians wrote a letter to CMS and said, are pharmacists considered non-physician practitioners? Are they considered auxiliary personnel? Can they be a part of my collaborative care team, which we now call value-based care team members? And CMS came back and said, yes, they can. They're considered under the incident to billing Medicare Part B billing methodology. Pharmacists can bill incident to. Nothing was happening. Very few pharmacists, some working in clinics, were starting to do it more and more, and the word was getting out. But it really wasn't until COVID where you saw the ability for pharmacists to understand, along with physicians, that pharmacists could be a part of this billing methodology. So the reason why I went through that is this has been available for pharmacists for a very long time. And I'm not going to go into what I believe to be the issue as to why, because it's controversial and it's Leigh Davitian's conspiracy theories. But I'm not quite sure why the national pharmacy organizations, not to name anyone specific, was not making this a huge deal. So when Jaron called me, I was ecstatic because I'm like, this guy gets it. This guy is going to do it, and we're going to do it together. So after we went through the journey of making sure that we understood that pharmacists could meet all 7 requirements of Incident to billing, that we talked with physician groups to have them understand that pharmacists could do this, and then we realized, great, now we got to get out there and educate pharmacists that they can do this. But that was the first thing that we decided to go after. We then started talking about total care management, medication management therapy, drug regimen review, medication reconciliation review, primary care management, chronic care management, remote patient monitoring, pharmacogenomics, all of those. And if we go by the acronyms, TCM, CGMs, MTMs, DRR, MRRs, PCM, CCMs, RPMs, PGX, all those are opportunities in addition to Incident to, for pharmacists to really get out there and to be paid for their clinical services. So although Jaron and I started on this journey in 2021, and I started in 2009, there's all these other clinical pathways that we're really trying to educate pharmacists about, that they can take their clinical skills to a much bigger level. It's just educating them on it. And that's kind of where Jaron and I are right now.
Yeah. So I just want to emphasize, ever since we met, I think our main goal, or what we've been doing ever since we met, is trying to minimize barriers.
Correct.
Because there are so many barriers, especially with Incident to. And I just want to announce to everyone listening, one of the barriers is cost. To figure out how to do this, it takes an enormous amount of time and investment to figure it out. However, in October, when we meet for the annual ASCP conference, ASCP will officially be the first professional organization to offer these educational services to anyone who enrolls in it. It's obviously going to be at a discounted price if you're an ASCP member, but we're making this information available to the masses. We want pharmacists to have this information. We want to educate more pharmacists, and we want this barrier to be minimized so that more people have this information, have this education, and have the ability and the tools and resources needed to start doing innovative clinical services, collaborating with physician groups, and making this stuff happen. So I want to emphasize right now, you, me, and Thea, just I think 3 or 4 weeks ago,
Right.
We all came to DC. I mean, you were there already, but me and Thea flew in. We went to ASCP headquarters. We recorded a seminar. So there's 6 hours of footage for people to watch before the actual seminar that we will do in San Diego at the ASCP conference. And that's where we are hoping that we will get a lot of people enrolled and start getting more consultant pharmacists adding these innovative services to their clinical practice. And this is where we need it the most. We have an aging population. We have an overburdened nursing staff in nursing facilities and polypharmacy and transition. It's a hotbed for all the issues in healthcare right now. And the more pharmacists we get at ASCP to help with this, the better.
Right.
But we also want to emphasize that ASCP wants to be the home for all consultant pharmacists and not just senior care pharmacists. Like we're trying, and ASCP is all about being the support mechanism that has been a huge void for pharmacists for a very long time. As you mentioned, 2009, 2014, these services have been available, but nobody's been doing anything about it, and nobody's been able to figure out how to do anything about it. And that's the barrier we're removing right now. And we want to make that abundantly clear. Like, this is the time for all of us to join forces, and there's strength in unity. We don't need to remain in silos anymore. Let's all start working together and get this education and start collaborating with physicians because they're desperate for our help as well.
Right.
So what are some of the victories we've had so far, Leigh? And sorry, you can say what you're going to say as well.
No. Correct. So the barriers are interesting because I think every pharmacist that I talk with, and I've talked to, as Jaron knows, 300 plus pharmacists, which is kind of random. Why would a lawyer talk to all these clinical pharmacists? Well, again, I'm working with ASCP to try to be able to educate especially younger innovative, and younger is obviously subjective. I feel like I'm young, but I think we all know that there's a new generation of pharmacists out there, and they want to be entrepreneurial and they want to be highly clinical. And I'm not saying that they don't want to ever dispense or touch a drug or not work in a pharmacy. Maybe they do, but they also want to be clinical. And part of the problem is educating them about these different opportunities. So one of the barriers are they just don't know that a lot of, I just went through TCM, CGM, MTM, DRR, MTR, RPM. All those acronyms, all of those are available for pharmacists to do in a clinical way. And when I talk to these pharmacists who either call me by either 6 degrees of separation off of LinkedIn, or Jaron will recommend, or Chad Wars of ASCP, a lot of them don't know all the various opportunities out there. So one of the barriers is really education, because when I get off the phone with them, I have nothing to gain for pharmacists being clinical or not. It's just, I feel like I'm in this season of my career. I've worked for a very long time. I've been doing this for 33 plus years. And I kind of want to come back home and see pharmacists. And again, no one in my family is a pharmacist. We all know I'm not a pharmacist, but that's really where I got my chops in healthcare. And I'm very grateful, and I'm trying to pay it forward. And that is, I know how much you guys are now being valued by physicians and other healthcare professionals. So it's just educating and getting the word out there and explaining to pharmacists how they can do this and how they can take a risk. And the risk is really minimized greatly if they understand how to do it. So that's what I think one of the barriers are currently is, Jaron, the lack of education, the lack of understanding of all the clinical pathways, the fear of getting involved with Medicare and Medicaid, because when you become involved with Medicare and Medicaid payments, because more than not, some of these are going to be through an incident to relationship or a relationship through a collaborative practice agreement, you are going to be receiving funds from Medicare and Medicaid. And I think a lot of pharmacists are fearful regard taking that on because there's a lot of compliance that is involved for taking government funds. So not only do you need to make sure that you're compliant and following the rules and regulations, the physicians and healthcare providers you're partnering with, you need to make sure that they're compliant. So
doing it right has never been more emphasized, Leigh, than just recently when we saw, there's some small company that just had $949 million worth of a lawsuit pressed their direction, and there was an awarded component with a very large player in the long-term care space. And so I think what you guys are doing to be able to help reduce individuals' overall burden and anxiety toward entering what is a newer space, not newer in terms of, like you said, legislatively or allowed from a legal standpoint, but newer just for pharmacists to think of it as an opportunity or an option, a full-fledged career option as opposed to a side dabble of some sort, I think is excellent. And the ability for us to educate those pharmacists and make them aware of kind of the next steps in their careers and the progression of what our profession is looking at, I think is just really commendable. So thank you guys for putting that time and effort into getting that all done. I think the show notes, Jaron, let's make sure we plug something inside of there and make sure folks can find out the links and all the next steps that they can take to be ready for October so they can lock and load inside of it. So the one thing I do want to bring us to is we talked about something that I think just makes way too much sense, right, in pharmacy. Like us being able to bring everybody together to recognize the next steps in the progression of what it is to be a pharmacist. Sure. Things that don't make as much sense are sometimes policy change, though, Leigh. And so one thing that was just hit our direction, and there's a number of things on the table that I'm sure you're looking at, an overall kind of a policy update from you and the perspectives you're getting from DC, I'm sure a lot of our listeners would be extremely interested in. And then one thing that I know you love talking about, because there's no controversy in it whatsoever, is this big, bold, beautiful amazing bill that was just passed across, and all the changes that it's going to cause and the ripple effects throughout healthcare. I mean, I think it can be looked at in several different vantage points on positive and negative standpoints, just like every piece of legislation. But I'd love to get your thoughts and kind of educate our viewers on what you're seeing.
Oh, okay. So beyond controversial, I mean, yikes. This has been a very long budget reconciliation process to get this piece of legislation passed on July the 3rd. It's interesting. I don't even know what the moniker fake news means anymore. I know that was something that was created during the Trump first administration, and it's kind of caught on. But there is something that's called evolutionary facts within the media. So just to let you all know, there are some people that say that the legislation that was passed was 1,000 pages, then it was 1,100 pages, then it was 1,400 pages, then it was 869 pages. Well, I read it from the beginning to the end. I can tell you all about the Golden Dome with defense missiles. I could tell you about all the increases into military. I could talk to you about all the different changes to the National Park Service. I mean, I read it all. Doesn't mean that I'm an expert in it, but I thought, you know what? If I'm going to talk about the one big beautiful bill, which they actually called because it's the One Big Bold Beautiful Bill Act, is I read it. And one of the reasons why it was controversial was there was a very close passage. It passed in the House from 218 to 214. And then in the Senate, the vice president had to come in to cast his vote to change the 50-50 to 51-50 vote. So that right there, when you're in Washington, you know that when you have a very long process, which this started in October of 2024, and you have, let's say, about 900 pages, and then you do have a very close package, that it's going to be a controversial bill. So having said that, and having read it, it's going to be kind of the world according to Leigh Davitian, based on reading it. But I also make sure that I read conservative interpretations and analyses from think tanks that are in Washington. Then I read kind of the, Associated Press, Reuters, kind of the middle of the road, and then obviously some liberal analysis with some of the liberal think tanks. So after you take that all into a big mixing pot, it still leaves someone confused. So I can tell you that we all know that the tax cuts was a priority. Also, deportations, the border wall, the military increasing, and having the opportunity to have missile defense in the military. But those priorities for the Republican-controlled Congress and with President Trump, there's somehow that you have to pay for those programs. You have to be able to pay for a permanent tax cut. You have to be able to pay for border walls and deportations and the building of some of these new facilities for immigrants that are going to be deported. And again, for the missile defense portion of it. And the pay for was in healthcare, more than not. There were some clean energy programs and climate programs that were cut to help fund the priorities. There was food supplemental programs, which is also called SNAP, which used to be your food stamps. Some of those programs have been greatly marginalized and minimized, but really the reductions to Medicaid and the repealing of certain portions of the Affordable Care Act, which is also called Obamacare, is really what ended up paying for this bill to be able to be passed. And again, if you embrace kind of the evolving news, some people believe that this bill that was passed adds 3.3 trillion to the federal deficit over the next 10 years. And then you hear some people say 4 trillion, 4.2 trillion, 4.6 trillion, 5.3 trillion. I just read something today, which was 5.7 trillion. So whatever it is, there is going to be some type of adding to the federal deficit over the next 10 years. So why I do all that is that's not fake news. That is real. And what is real is that it is a large bill. It will add to the deficit. There are priorities that the Trump administration and the Republican Congress wanted. And to pay for those benefits, you had to cut costs. So let's talk about the cutting of the cost. As I told you, clean energy and climate, we're not going to go into great detail with that. Food supplements / food stamps or SNAPs, whatever you want to call it. So let's look at the cuts to Medicaid. So the cuts to Medicaid, Kevin, and I've already talked to Jaron about this is why it's really difficult for me to talk about this is because I could have another colleague who's equally as talented or less talented or more talented than me in an expertise of 30 plus years, totally read that piece of legislation very different than what I did.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the various think tanks, conservative think tanks, liberal think tanks, why this is very hard for me to talk about is no one really knows what the true implementation is going to do and how it's going to impact specific healthcare sectors. The one thing that we do know is that the cuts to Medicaid, as of right now, have more impact on individuals regarding the new work requirements that are going to be mandated. There's going to be some tightening of programs within Medicaid. They are going to make Medicaid recipients pay for more services. It used to be, as you all know, some Medicaid recipients could barely afford to pay for copays, so they really didn't pay anything. Well, that's now changing. It's now going to be less federal monies to the states, and those that are on Medicaid are going to have to be able to work between the ages of 18 and 64. And then on top of it, there's going to be more of an expense for when they do go to their physicians. So that's kind of a global implication on the healthcare. But let's really get down to who's it going to impact. In my interpretation, I don't believe there's going to be a direct impact on pharmacists, possibly on pharmacies. I believe where the bigger impact is going to be is where those pharmacists work. If they work in rural hospitals, if they work in charitable hospitals, long-term care facilities, and other type of long-term care settings such as skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes, those providers, those settings are going to be hurt, especially in rural areas. So that's where I think the ancillary impact is going to be with pharmacists. Then you're also going to be having some physicians maybe not take on some of these more innovative clinical value-based care practices because it does add more work and it does add more staff. So they may be cutting back on their innovation. And now that we're part of this innovation of a value-based care member, it could impact those relationships. But again, some of the bigger issues that impact pharmacists did not make it into this legislation. So I just wrote a piece of, I just wrote a piece regarding kind of what was left on the cutting floor room, what did not make it into this bill. And one thing was global PBM reform. You did not have, so that's going to impact the entire kind of pharmacy world and pharmacies. There was some provisions in the legislation that impacts PBMs on a Medicaid managed care perspective, but the more global PBM reforms were not in this legislation. The other thing that wasn't in there was the enhanced community access to pharmacy services, ECAPS, which was promoted by a number of national pharmacy organizations, including NCPA, APHA, ASCP, to allow pharmacists to be able to bill and have provider status under Medicare Part B as it pertains to vaccinations. That made it on the cutting room floor. And then the other one was telehealth flexibilities, really allowing some of those COVID telehealth flexibilities that allowed innovation to happen within the pharmacist clinical space. That also was not included. So my analysis is right now is that there's going to be a larger impact on individuals being able to be on Medicaid. I won't put a number on it. There are a lot of people that are saying numbers. I do believe that there's going to be hospitals, nursing homes, and other healthcare systems impacted by it, especially in rural and underserved areas. And that will again have an impact on pharmacists. So it's more of what didn't make it into this legislation, which would have helped pharmacists and pharmacies. So part of it was a little bit disheartening that it didn't make it into the legislation this time around, but we are being promised that there is going to be a second reconciliation package later this year, and we're being promised that PBM reform on a more global level, telehealth flexibilities will be made permanent, and that there will be that Medicare Part B provider status for pharmacists on that limited basis under vaccinations. So,
Well, what kind of impact do you think this will have on physician practices? Just out of curiosity, then.
so, ironically, having been at a physician today, her exact words out of my mouth, because it's my allergist giving HIPAA information out. Yes, I have allergies. And she said to me after we had our visit, she's like, Leigh, help me out. She's like, we're already having issues regarding the fact that a majority of the Medicaid patients that we see probably will not be with us anymore. So that's going to have our, patient base be changed greatly. And we're in the process of trying to reconfigure staffing, trying to reconfigure what type of impact there'll be to the bottom line. And, I'm in the District of Columbia. So we have a very wealthy part of DC. It's like a South Africa, a very wealthy part of DC and an underserved area, which is the indigenous population. And so we do have a lot of Medicaid recipients. So a lot of physicians in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area are preparing for their practices to be impacted by this in a lot of different ways. But I think the bigger impact's going to be in the rural and underserved areas.
Yeah.
Let's jump into that one right there, Leigh. With the rural and underserved, I've already seen a number of hospital associations and individual critical access hospitals, other facilities reach out for public support and some community involvement when it comes to the impacts or the ripples that could occur here, primarily addressing the Medicaid cuts that have occurred and not knowing yet what that's going to do with the entire population that they're currently serving in rural America. One thing I'm curious to hear about is the opposite side of the coin. There's been some individuals that have really been excited about the appropriation or the rural health transformation program, the $50 billion that's going to go toward rural health in 2026 through 2030. That's really a state-derived program, which actually reminds me a lot of an 1115 waiver program, but this one directly controlling kind of rural health spend. Your thoughts there and how those $50 billion can be used in rural health and how you hope they're used?
So, again, I'm trying to be as nonpartisan because I think you all know, and those of you watching professionally, I'm bipartisan, I'm nonpartisan, I'm apolitical. I've done this for 33 years where I've lobbied with congressional members and administrations. I've helped draft legislation, all of that, and I've had to be nonpartisan. So I'm hoping that I'm coming across as, again, just speaking more truth to facts based on my collection of evidence-based, kind of in the evidence-based world that helps shape my comments. So, Kevin, I will tell you that the $50 billion stabilization program was a good start. But there is a number of entities out there saying that it had to be closer to $250 billion in a stabilization fund in order to really make an impact on the rural hospitals. So the question is, and this is where I hate to pontificate or I hate to talk about the future,
Sure.
those $50 billion will have an impact, but we have no idea how it's going to be distributed. Also, I don't know if any of us on this podcast are economic, PhD, empirical data specialists, like my business partner, but we don't know how many rural hospitals, rural physicians, rural healthcare settings are literally on the verge of bankruptcy. We don't know, how many are currently maybe 3 months away from possibly having to close its doors. So if you take that into consideration, will the $50 billion be enough to stabilize those rural and underserved hospitals and healthcare settings? And that's just what we'll have to see. It was a lifeline that the Senate threw in at the last minute because I think the outcry of the rural community and underserved community was so loud that they realized they needed to do something. But did it go far enough?
Yeah, it's a good question on that side, and I do think you bring up a great point when it comes to the fragile nature of what we're currently dealing with in rural medicine, which is the world that I love dearly. But there's a number of groups out there when you're pointing toward how many are on the brink. Literally 30% of the critical access hospitals or rural hospitals throughout America could close in the next 6 to 7 years. Some projections have shown, so that's 600 facilities. And that leaves a massive disparity out there. And so when it comes to the utilization of those funding opportunities, it'll be really curious how individual states end up using them and what they can use them for. Because there's an interesting piece, Leigh, and I think one thing that's interesting. We're talking about billing and legislation, kind of all in the same slew here. When it comes to Medicaid opportunities versus Medicare opportunities and some of the CMS kind of guidance, some of the incident to billing opportunities that have been the most simplistic, for pharmacists have been inside of Medicare for us to be able to get into that space. When it comes to the Medicaid cuts and changes with incident to billing opportunities in particular, do you feel that those cuts are going to directly impact the ability for pharmacists to be able to practice in those incident to billing spaces? Or is it still the most established inside of Medicare? So that's going to be a different world.
Great
So,
question.
Jaron, you were shaking your head. We talked about this.
Yeah.
You want to jump in first?
Well, if I remember right, you don't think it'll have a huge impact. There may be some, but I think the big picture is I think we'll be fine. If I remember correctly, because it was a couple of months ago when we talked. Yeah.
Yes. So Incident 2 is a Medicare Part B billing methodology. So it won't really impact the Incident 2.
Oh, okay. So I just want to specify then. So these cuts are almost primarily to Medicare A. Is that the part I'm
Medicaid?
forgetting?
There's not that much. Medicare is not a huge part of this.
Oh, okay.
869-page legislation. The majority of the discussion is Medicaid.
Got it.
And I think we all know, the work requirement, the provider taxes, the tightening of the belt, where again, Medicaid recipients that do qualify will be paying more out of pocket. The question is, can they afford, So the Medicaid impact in innovation, I think, is going to impact more of the providers that do a lot of Medicaid right now. Because, let's just think about it. If you have less people on Medicaid, because it's harder to qualify, they are tightening their belts. People might not be able to afford these additional costs that they'll now have to pay when they go see specialists and have diagnostic testing done, et cetera. So what they'll do is, Kevin, they just won't go. And so that's where you get into the whole, are you going to have chronic disease state problems now? Are people not going to go? Now, remember, I'm just saying hypothetically. I'm not saying that's going to happen. But if you have to have work requirements that need to be met and reporting requirements and more documentations to prove that you qualify for Medicaid, and then once you get on Medicaid, you're going to have to pay more out of pocket. The question is, are these people going to be able to afford to go to the various doctors, specialists, again, testing to keep up if they have a chronic disease state? And most people are saying that data has proven in the past that no, that chances are there will be a lot of patients, a lot of consumers that will end up starting to use now I know a lot of people think that this is hyperbolic, and it's not. It's just, I lived through this already. They're going to go to the emergency room, and that's going to be their primary care physician. So I believe that there are going to be global, and when I use the word global, it just means more. There's a lot of different ancillary impact to patients, and there's going to be a lot of impact to healthcare settings, and there's going to be an impact to providers.
Which
What
will
exactly those?
go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. What those are exactly? That's where I start getting a little bit squirrely, and I don't want to say, because I don't want to add more fire to this already controversial piece of legislation. Half of the United States support it, half don't. And if you go to the middle, it's really hard right now to kind of get to the middle because there's such extremes that I'm still trying to vet through it
Yeah.
regarding its impact.
Yeah, and I think that as this progresses, it might create more of a burden on healthcare workers, which is already a problem.
Which is already a problem. Yes,
Yeah.
they do. They do believe it's going to impact the workforce shortage issue
Yeah.
also. And there's going to be people just, I mean, we know right now, just RNs, nurses are leaving the profession. They're retiring. They're burnt out. They're not being appreciated because you now have nurse practitioners and physicians associates kind of taking the lead. So there's a huge nursing shortage of RNs. So this may be something else. You have physicians like my allergist, my ENT. She's like, I may retire. This is going to be a huge blow to my business because I do have a large population of Medicare, Medicaid, and my private pay is still there. But that's not where the majority of my patients are.
Right. And so once again, we as pharmacists can fill that void and reduce the workload burden. And my practice naturally reduces quite a bit of work burden on the nursing staff in the facilities. There's a lot of things that we do that pharmacists can do to help make this and improve this, make it better. So I want to emphasize that as we kind of wrap up here, and I'll kind of switch gears to a little more, but I want to kind of tie it all in together here. But, I was actually, like a couple weeks ago, I was just reading through our fan mail, and I'll be honest, we actually don't have any fan mail. However,
wait, I send stuff giving thumbs up and comments.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a comment on a platform. But,
okay, I'll send you some mail. I'll get a stamp or two.
Yeah, that'd be great. However, when you look at Kevin and myself, obviously we're heartthrobs, so it's just a matter of time till we get some more actual fan mail.
Yes, exactly.
But I think inquiring minds really want to know. Who do you think should be the next James Bond? Is it Kevin or is it Jaren? I know. It's really.
They're thinking of maybe having two. They're thinking of having two James Bonds. So if that happens, you two are on the top of my list. I am not gonna pick.
That was an incredible lawyer escape clause right there.
The lawyer escape clause. Exactly.
All right. Well, who should be cast as the next supervillain then, Kevin or Jaren?
See, in my mind, you guys are both incredible villains. So How do I do this? Can't we have two supervillains? I mean,
It's happened many
Kevin,
times.
you're rocking it in your world, and I know you less than I do, Jaron. But your name's all over the place. People talk nonstop about you. You're being very innovative. I'm very impressed. Who am I? I'm a lowly lawyer in Washington, D.C. But I mean, I can see you being an incredible villain. And I think, you know what? See, you guys are both from the West Coast. If you guys could have been East Coast, West Coast, I would have said, look, two villains. But you could be the Northwest, Kevin, and then Jaron, of course, I adore you. So, you could be our Beastie Boy villain. I mean, what can I say?
Yeah. And I'll be honest. Kevin has the perfect square jaw for a superhero, and I have the pointy chin, perfect for a supervillain. So
you do. But my question is, who's Kevin's favorite band? Because that's really going to change my answer potentially.
Oh man. Well, the Beastie Boys is not on at the very top of my list. I'm sorry, Jaron. I know that's going to break your heart. But when it comes to favorite bands, Leigh, I think I'd have to go between Styx, George Strait.
Okay.
Those would be way up there for me.
That's a little bit of a juxtaposition. A little country beats. Yeah, hard rock. Okay.
Were you even born when Styx were
Styx? Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I'm impressed. So see, getting back to the villain, got two to choose from. I think we could have two.
Yeah, so. I do think speaking of villains, there's an easy way for us to be able to, I think, move forward with our episode with a villainy kind of talk, and that's the only group of villains that I think we can really point to with holding pharmacy back for the next 10, 20 years are ourselves, right? In general, like we are the individuals holding ourselves back. I think the number of conversations that we're fortunate to have, and I know we have an innovators kind of conversation here coming up really soon, is talking about all the opportunities that are in front of us to take advantage of and not to be able to squander, and so that's one thing. If it's the big, beautiful bill, if it's any other piece of legislation coming our way, there's all these changes that are constant. Isn't that a saying, right? I don't think I invented that one. But with all the changes that are occurring, there's always those opportunities to be able to take advantage of them. And Leigh, thank you so much for talking about some of those opportunities and being able to champion that for pharmacists. It's a big deal for us.
It is. Well, the one thing I want to do, because I always have to recap, on the Big Beautiful Bill Act, I do want viewers to know again that there are some good things in there. I mean, obviously, there's things in there that is going to make America better. And the Republicans, with their trifecta, did an incredible job to get that piece of legislation passed. I just personally think right now, not having a lot of time to really delve into it, I can't foreshadow what the true impact is going to be or not to be. In my humble 33 plus years of experience, I just know there's going to be an impact. But let's say that there's not a direct impact on pharmacists and pharmacies right now. There's so many other opportunities taking away the Big Beautiful Bill and not even pretending like it happened. And it's what's currently in front of you all. And what I want you all to do is recognize that if you're even slightly interested, you've got 3 people on this podcast you can reach out to. And again, as I said to you, I kind of feel like I'm coming home. I'm coming back and working a lot with ASCP to try to help a very clinical set of pharmacists that have entrepreneur spirit. And it doesn't have to be long-term care pharmacy. I know, Kevin, that you wanted me to make sure that I talk about all different type of pharmacists and all different settings. So not just long-term care, just because that's where my home was, is I'm talking about all pharmacists have the ability to clinically be rock stars. And you have so many opportunities in front of you. If you're afraid of the risk, you just need to talk to people like us on this podcast, and we'll point you in the right direction to get you so that you can do something that I can do. I'm able to practice at the top of my craft. I went to law school, I did all the different licensures, all that. I'm able to work the top of my craft and be paid at the top of my craft. You all should too. And it's ridiculous that in the 33 years I've been involved in pharmacy, that you guys are slowly, gradually getting there, but it's really not happening to the level I want. So that's why I'm going to continue to scream as loud as I can, with or without Jaron. So
I'll be
I
there.
thank you. I'm sorry?
I'll be there.
You'll be there. So,
Yes.
But I thank you very much for inviting me to talk. I hope the comments were helpful. And, if any viewers want to reach out to me directly, Kevin, feel free, and Jaron, to supply my information, and hope this was helpful.
We will start pushing the fan mail your way, Leigh, for sure.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. Be careful. Be good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.